Welcome back to another episode of the Think Deeper podcast. I am your co-host, Will Harrop, joined by Joe and Jack Wilkie. Fellas, we are in the middle of what society and the world deems as quote-unquote Pride Month. We're already seeing all the restaurants and the organizations that are putting their big advertisements out in rainbow colors, and you know, it's no secret the agenda that everybody pushes, that this is just something that the world is fully embracing, full speed ahead. It's also no secret to many of our listeners that Jack wrote a book many years ago now. Jack, was I even born when you wrote the book? I mean, it's been a while. No, just kidding. But he wrote, what year was it, Jack? He wrote
it was
Failure.
2014, so it's coming up on 10 years next year.
2014, coming up, where he wrote on, and I don't want to speak for him, I'll hand it to you here in a second, but essentially why you need to pull your kids out of public school was essentially the premise of the book. But he laid out all the areas in which the public education system fails, and I would say, you know, since that book was written, we have seen an exponential increase in the LGBTQ plus influence in the public schools. That was an issue back in 2014. It's even more of an issue now. And so I'd encourage you, go check out Jack's book, Failure, online, and it is going to be on sale all summer long. So I don't know, I should have asked when that sale ends, but we'll say all of June, all of July. Be sure and go check that out. And again, it will be on sale. It's a very big deal. Obviously, last week our episode centered around what the plus in LGBTQ plus means and stands for. And so we need to have the answers. We need to have solutions. Jack, anything you want to add to that as we push that book for the summer?
I think people a lot of times just roll their eyes and go, "Yeah, I know, you know, but it's different here," or you don't know what you don't know. And so I go back to the history of this and the quotes from people who signed the Declaration of Independence, who were saying your kids don't belong to you. All this rhetoric we're seeing today, and the founders of public schooling, compulsory public school in America in the 1800s. Hey, we've got to take these kids away from their parents. I mean, like, it's kind of the idea. And so what you're seeing now as the world has devolved away from God, again, history's all there, the documentation's there, how the LGBT stuff was being brought in the 90s when I was a kid, it's all there. And so again, you don't know what you don't know. And so I think it'd be worth looking at if this is one of those discussions where you think, yeah. No, go check it out. It'll open your eyes, I think. It certainly did mine. I went in thinking schools were bad. I came out going, wow, I had no idea.
Yeah, Jack did a ton of research for this. He was living at home when he did, a long time ago. And he did a ton of research. Books stacked on the tables of him reading all sorts of people. So, I mean, it's a well-studied book, well thought out, well presented. I know I'm bragging on my brother there, but it's a very good book. If you haven't had a chance, read it. And I'm pushing you, 10-year anniversary, to update the book, because what's happened in the last 10 years is
there's a section in there.
I think we should do a revised
on the back of it where I said, the next thing that's coming is they're going to be letting boys in the girls' restroom and vice versa. We're there now. I mean, that's not a prediction anymore. That happened years ago now, and so you're right. It does need an update. But
how sad that 9 years ago is so dated.
Oh, it went
compared to
downhill
what
fast,
they have pushed. But yes, it is, again, as Will said, on sale all summer long, which gets that Kid Rock song stuck in my head now as it's playing around all summer long. But anyway, with that, fellas, Will, if you want to lead us into today's topic.
Yeah, so we are talking this week about substances, various substances that are challenges for a lot of people. We were talking about, we've done this for going on a year and a half, and we have not talked about alcohol. We have not talked about any kind of drugs or marijuana, vaping, anything like that. So we felt like it was time to kind of devote an episode to, what does the Bible have to say about these things? What does the Bible have to say about alcohol? What does the Bible have to say about vaping, tobacco, all kind of stuff that we're going to get into. I don't want to preview the entire episode here, but it's always important with every single one of these to take a look at not just, well, does the Bible call it a sin? If not, great. But to look at what is wise. What is going to be wise for us to teach? What is going to be wise for us to model and again, teach to our children? Substances affect a lot of people. They are obviously illegal drugs, alcohol. My family, on my dad's side, severe alcohol issues. I come from a line of genetically, again, alcoholics. I've got I think it's my second cousin, dad's first cousin, who is currently in prison for a crime he committed while intoxicated. It's just, it affects so many people. And so, guys, I think we're going to start with alcohol just because that is the biggest, that's the one that's typically the most hotly debated. That's the one that affects, I would say, the most people, although we will devote a significant amount of time to some of the other stuff, tobacco, vaping, marijuana, again, all that stuff later on. But let's start with alcohol. Again, I do want to kind of frame it, and then I'll hand it off to one of you guys as far as the standard kind of debate surrounding this alcohol question. You've obviously got your teetotalers that would argue that one single drop of alcohol is a violation of God's word. It is a sin, and so basically no alcohol ever. You've kind of got another side that says, that social drinking is wrong, and obviously drunkenness is wrong, but what one does in the privacy of their own home, not necessarily wrong. And then you've got another side that is fine with social drinking, is fine with drinking in their own home as long as drunkenness doesn't take place. Would that be a pretty fair characterization of kind of the positions on the alcohol front, as far as you've got your ones that say no drop of alcohol ever, you've got your ones that say, okay, no social drinking and no drunkenness, but what you do at home is fine, and then you've got others that say pretty much any of it is fine as long as you don't get drunk. Any addition to that?
Yeah, there's a fourth one. I was talking to a Christian who occasionally gets drunk, but he's not a drunkard. He would occasionally get drunk, but it was once every very few.
So is that like if you occasionally commit adultery, you're not an adulterer? Is that how that works? Or?
Right. I couldn't believe, I literally sat there. This was in church, and I was talking with him. I'm like,
what?
Just staring blank, like, I'm sorry, what did you just say? So yeah, I mean, he's a Christian, but yes, there is that fourth one.
Gotcha. Yeah, that one's new to me. Yeah.
I figured it was new to me too. But I think that before we really can answer the question of where we fall and whatnot, we do have to lay out a few principles, right? We have to lay out the fact that the Bible does call us to be sober in spirit, right? Do not get drunk with wine. You can look at Ephesians 5:18 and be filled with the Spirit, right? Not getting drunk with wine, and it's included in the list of Romans 13:13, and some things that throughout Scripture and multiple places, Galatians 5, 1 Peter 4, multiple places where it's calling out, hey, make sure alcohol is a very dangerous thing, and the Bible does call us to be sober, and the Bible does call us to be wise, and it calls us to do a lot of different things of not getting drunk. And so I think at the outset, we do have to lay out, there are some biblical principles. And we're going to circle back around with some of the Proverbs. There's other things like that. But Jack, I'm going to toss it to you, unless there's more you want to add on that. But is alcohol a sin?
We have to cover this. I really hate this discussion so much. As an aside, I put that this was a debatable issue that Christians disagree on in an article, and it was a list of examples I was giving, and this was like 10 years ago at this point, a list of examples I was giving of things that Christians can debate on. The fact that I said it was up for debate got multiple people to email me. One of them emailed me, and when I just said that's how I take it, he bought Facebook advertising to say, don't read Jack Wilkie from Focus Press, he's a heretic. And people were sending me screenshots of this sponsored post showing up in their feed. Like, this guy spent his own money to tell people that I'm a heretic because I said it's not that I say I'm a drunk and man, go out there and just pour one back. No,
knock him back.
Yeah, I just said, well, there's room for disagreement on this. So if you're that kind of person who says there's no room for disagreement on this is probably not the episode for you. There is a case to be made in both directions. And so with it, I don't know. Just saying that, I know, is enough for some people to shut it off, whatever. Here's one of the other things I wanted to plead with people. I've been thinking about this lately. If we say something on an episode you think that's so stupid, so wrong, whatever else, you are more than welcome to do that. Maybe turn off that episode. I hate this thing we do of like, oh man, I love these guys. I listen to these guys all the time. Oh, they said something I disagree with. I'm done. Come on. Like this is that conflict resolution thing we talked about last time. So if you disagree with this one, this might not be your episode. That's okay. We'll move on to the next one.
If you disagree, subscribe to Focus Plus and tell us in the comments.
On the deep end. There you go. Nice sale. Yeah, that's hey, some people are willing to spend money to tell us we're wrong, so there you go.
Yeah, so that's right.
There's a lot of biblical verses, obviously, that warn about the dangers of this. And Will brought up his family. I'm the same. I'm just going to put it right up front. I will not touch the stuff. I mean, grandparents on both sides, great-grandparents, imprisoned, left their family, deadbeats, awful stuff that all started with alcohol problems. And so, my dad dragged the family out of that. We're not going to go back down that path, and that's just a decision we've made. And so, if you're wondering, before anybody rushes out and says, "Well, they open the door to they're drunks," no, I don't touch the stuff. The Bible also makes a good case against it, and a number of times because of things like that. Proverbs 20 verse 1, wine's a mocker and a strong drink is a brawler, and whoever's tempted by it is unwise. And so that is there. Proverbs 23:31, do not gaze at the wine when it's red. Proverbs 31, that it's unwise for kings to be drunk with wine, alcohol, beer, whatever your translation says. And so there are a number of warnings there in the Bible. And you brought up, be sober is in there. Do not get drunk is in there. And so we have to establish all of that. Will?
Real quick, one of the things that, so I've taught a class, I believe at Jackson Temple before you guys were there, and also in Decatur. I think, to me, one of the strongest pieces of evidence for the side of, hey, just don't ever touch it. What is the very first time we see alcohol used in God's word? Noah. After the flood. So the very first time we see alcohol used in God's word, it's used in a very negative sense. A very, sin takes place. I don't think that's coincidence. I don't think that is something that, I think that's a worthy point to bring up, I guess, is what I'll put out there. So that would be another thing that I would add to this whole, it's very, very unwise. I mean, we'll get to here in just a second. There is a case to be made that it is not a sin. People don't want to hear that. But I did want to throw that out there because the very first time we see it is right after the flood, and it turns out to be a pretty sinful situation for Noah and his sons.
Yeah. All right, so let's get into it. Let's get into, now we're saying, yes, we're against it. We don't touch this stuff. I would strongly caution people against it, specifically if you are genetically predisposed to it. There is that gene that alcoholism runs in my family. Why would I tempt that? Why would I ever want to run toward it? Just because you drink one drop doesn't make you an alcoholic, but it may potentially lead toward things. And so, yes, we're going to come right out at the top and say, we're not fans of drinking. We don't do it ourselves. We're not saying that this is the best thing you can do. Not at all. However, we're asking a different question. Is it a sin? And to this, I'm going to come out with a resounding no. People may disagree. I'm just going to be straight off the top here. I don't think it's a sin. I don't think you can call it a sin. I know there are people in the Brotherhood that, again, Jack, as you already mentioned, will flame me alive for that. There's too many things in the Bible that go toward, God knew there was going to be wine. I mean, there's wine offerings, right? Like Jesus, it's the wine and the bread. Like that's literally what he instituted that Christians are to take every Sunday. And I realized, boy, it's fruit of the vine. It's got to be grape juice. What do you think they were drinking back then? It was not grape juice. No matter how many times you can watch these videos, Church of Christ videos that are trying to tell you it was basically grape juice and here's all of this stuff.
Here's my favorite thing about this, where we get into the Greek and oinos, and that it was not alcoholic, and you hear these arguments, and you've got these Bible verses that speak positively about that, of the fruit of the vine with the communion, but also in the Old Testament the drink offering, or times where it speaks positively about God gives this to man as a reward for their harvest, and things like that. And every time it says something positive about it, it's non-alcoholic, it's grape juice. Every time it says it's dangerous, it's alcoholic. It's just really amazing how that works. I mean, that is so convenient. It just...
That's crazy.
And if you've made that point before, think about that for just a second. How do you think that works? That it always, no matter what way it reads, it's reading it the way you want. That if it's speaking positively about it, it's got to be something different. It's just too convenient. And so I just wanted to make that point. As
right.
You say, there are these Bible verses that speak positively about it.
So we see Jesus' first miracle at Cana is what? Turning the water to wine. Well, it's turning the water to grape juice. And what they assume is because it's the good stuff, then it must be Welch's and not the Kroger version. That's got to be what it is when he turns it to the good stuff, it's the Welch's that's really good. Come on. But Jesus would not ever turn something to wine where somebody could get drunk. God created grapes. God created the ability for these things to take place. Was God enticing people? God created sex. Was he enticing people to use it to the negative? No. He had a clear design in mind for it, and the fact that people pervert it does not make it God's fault, does not mean that Jesus tempted people toward drunkenness or whatever else. But when you see Jesus in his very first miracle turning water to wine, there's such a significance to that. There's an Old Testament significance that goes back to it, But how people could look at that and say he just turned it to better grape juice, and that's the good stuff. That goes against every wedding feast ever given.
Right, like that was the one wedding in Jewish culture where they just had grape juice. The only one, right? Everywhere else had the I don't know if you were going to get into the Old Testament verses also, Joe, because we keep talking, there are verses that will speak positively of it. Ecclesiastes 9:7. Go, eat your bread with joy, drink your wine with a merry heart. Seems to be a pretty clear condoning of it there. You've got Psalm 104 verse 15. Wine that makes glad the heart of a man, oil to make his face shine, and bread which strengthens man's heart. You've got John 2 that Joe just brought up. Isaiah 62 is another one, verses 8 and 9. The Lord has sworn by his right hand and by the arm of his strength, surely I will no longer give you grain as food for your enemies, and the sons of the foreigner shall not drink your new wine for which you have labored. Again, I mean, this is stuff that, once again, like to Jack's point, people are going to say, when it's speaking positively of it, that's grape juice. When it's speaking negatively of it, it's alcohol. Just doesn't seem to add up there. One of the things that whenever I'm teaching on this, I always want to be very clear on, we're big advocates in the Church of Christ of, we don't speak where the Bible doesn't speak. We're silent where the Bible's silent. To me, this is an area a lot of times where we speak where the Bible doesn't speak. When we jump to the all alcohol is a sin, the Bible doesn't come down on that. It just simply doesn't. And I think every class on this, every sermon on this should be prefaced with, it is highly unwise. We don't recommend anybody doing it, and that's of course our position as well. It can lead to so many different kinds of sins. And I do think there is merit to the idea that the alcohol we have now today, or the wine or whatever, is far more alcoholic and far more intoxicating than it was back then. I don't think that means they were just drinking grape juice back in the Bible, or back in the Old Testament or the New Testament times. There obviously was some fermentation going on there, but again, I would caution people to not speak where the Bible doesn't speak, and I think that's where we see so many people jumping to, and it's noble, right? It's a good-hearted intent that we don't want our young people growing up thinking, alcohol's fine. We don't want them, experimenting and going down a path of debauchery and going down a path of drunkenness. That's noble. We of course don't want that, but we cannot speak where the Bible doesn't speak.
Because, and that's what you hear is, so what you're saying is it's okay for kids to drink. Of course not. Of course we're not condoning like going out and drinking a ton. We're saying, is it a sin? And what they want us to do, and I've had this, is I came out and say, hey, it's not a sin, and I've literally been taken aside. So you're saying that it's okay for people to end up, when they turn 21, for people to drink. That's what you're saying. I said it's not a sin. I didn't say that it's wise. I didn't say they need to jump out and, go do it and go to the bar right now. I didn't say any of those things. You're asking a specific question. Will you condone it versus is it a sin? Those are two separate questions. I don't condone drinking, but I will not call it a sin.
I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Here's the evidence for this. Just about every congregation I've been to, I've talked to elders. You have this hypothetical scenario. You know of a couple in your congregation. They don't get drunk. They don't go out and drink publicly. They don't go to bars. They enjoy wine at their house at night. Are you going to go to them and disfellowship them and say, you need to repent or we're disfellowshipping you? No. No eldership is going to do that. No preacher is going to do that. That's not something that we do. If it truly was something that is...
I think some would, genuinely. If they knew.
Really?
If they knew. And that's why this is one of the other things that I've discovered is that there are a lot more Christians quietly, privately doing that than a lot of these types realize. A lot of these church leaders that would do that realize is people just going, I'm just not going to tell anybody about it. And so the fact that Romans 14 very much says there's room for disagreement on this. The thing that I got flamed for saying there's room for disagreement, Paul on matters of opinion, bringing up what you eat and what you drink as a matter of, well, we're going to have different opinions on this. What does that mean? It is an opinion. And there...
You better take out a Facebook ad against Paul. Scary stuff.
Yeah. There is that in 1 Corinthians 9 and 10, and not only is there the verses against unwisdom, but also you will be a stumbling block, and you got to be very careful about that and take that seriously. And where he says, look, if for my brother's sake I have to give up all eating of meat, okay, I'll do it. And so to the person who does drink, you've got to embody that as well. It says, you know what, this is not worth everything else to me. This is not, I'm not going to stand for this right at all costs. Be wise about it. Be understanding of your brother and make room for them on this, or you're the one in sin. It becomes a sin for you if it goes to that level.
So let me steel man this real quick, because of the sermons that I've heard of the people that are adamantly against a single drop. They'll frame it with, it's wrong because of the influence. Because like the influence factor is the sole factor to what makes it a sin, is because in our culture today, alcohol is associated with sin. It's associated with sinful behavior. And so, again, the whole premise of their argument is because of the influence factor, that by itself makes it a sin. What do you guys have to add to that? So, again, they're not necessarily arguing that a drop of it is, by drinking one drop, it's wrong. They're arguing that when people see you, or when people see you buy it, or when people see you order it, or whatever it is, you have negatively affected your influence, therefore it is a sin. Any thoughts on that?
I think you have to be very careful who you're drinking around, and especially... I am against social drinking, against public drinking, because you do have the ability to be a stumbling block. I mean, you have the new Christian who's just come out of alcoholism, and he happens to see you at the bar drinking. Oh, I wasn't getting drunk. I mean, well, there goes your ability to disciple that guy, right? I mean, I think that is
and on that note, real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt you again before y'all take it even further. What do y'all make of 1 Peter 4:3, where he separates New King James drunkenness and drinking parties? Those are two separate things in 1 Peter 4, verse 3. To me, that's always been a pretty heavy indicator that going out and drinking publicly, social parties or whatever, is not that's something that clearly is labeled a sin as well. I didn't know if you guys had any studies in the Greek or any New American Standard translation differences that would have anything to add to that. That's something that's always stuck out to me, is those things are separated by Peter there.
Yeah, and I think there's no good case to be made for drinking in public. If you're going to look at, he tells Timothy, take a little wine for your stomach. That's a private thing. When you're seeing Proverbs 31 about the man, basically forgetting his bitterness and the guy who's basically going to die on his deathbed, that's not a public thing. He's not going out and carousing. And right in that context, it says it's not for kings to drink wine. It's not good for people who are about their faculties and need their faculties to drink it. Like, we don't see, you consider in Esther, and they're drunken wine or drunken party, right? They're having this party, and this is what kicks Esther, the Esther story off. Like, I don't think you ever see, correct me if I'm wrong, and maybe you could say Jesus at the wedding feast or whatever, but the idea of drinking parties, I just don't think that's wise. Most of the time when you see drinking in a context, it is done in a private setting or done in a setting where people can do it on their own. I don't have a problem with people drinking wine in their house. If they are getting drunk, they need to know that's not appropriate. They need to know what their threshold is as well, but I don't know. I think when you're in public, there's so many other things.
There's a cultural thing that cuts both ways on this discussion of a lot of the one drop drunk, it was all grape juice. All those people have no concept of not only the historical context of the Bible, but of the human race across all time in history. I mean, the Welch's grape juice thing, and like that distinction is what, 100 or 150-year-old distinction in America. Like, this is not something you go over to Europe. I mean, their drinking age is lower, and it's so widespread that it wouldn't really be a stumbling block the way it is here. Here, because there is that debate, because there is a bit of a social stigma to it in some ways, in some places, we have to account for that. This is one of those things where the Bible is not just a list of legalistic thou shalt, thou shalt nots. It's use your brain, use your heart, use your tap into the spirit guidance of the word to say, how do I handle this situation? And then as an American in this time and age, I don't know what I'm trying to say. There's precautions you have to take that other people don't have to take. And so that, again, that social thing that we're in right now blinds a lot of people to the reality of the omnipresence of alcohol throughout almost the entirety of human history that we don't have right now. And they need to be a little more open to that and understand that a little better when they're so, condemning of anybody, anything all the time, is realize that just doesn't fit with human history. And the way most Christians, the cultures most Christians have lived in are ones where you did drink, and drunkenness is wrong and all that, but like, this is part of it that we don't have in that way. And because we don't have it, that goes to the other side where they've got to make concessions of, this is a culture where there's a little bit more of a judgment to it. There's a little bit more to be careful about that other people might not have to worry about. And so I think that just totally gets missed by both sides of this discussion.
Well, fellas, have we exhausted the alcohol discussion before we move in? Any other points that we want to
I
make?
want to say one more thing. Matthew 11:19. This was a point I made with that guy who bought Facebook advertising against me. Is that they say that Jesus came, the Son of Man came as a drunk and a glutton. And so I pointed to that and said, why would they call Jesus a drunk? Nobody's ever called me a drunk because they've only ever seen me drinking coffee, milk, or Coke, or water. There's no accusation that I'm a drunk. So why would they accuse Jesus of being a drunk? Wouldn't have he had to drink something that would have led them to call him that? And I'm not, that's the nature of the wine that they had in that day. And his response was, so you're saying that Jesus sinned?
Oh, boy.
That's the paradigm that he's working with, is, well, we know it's a sin, therefore if Jesus did it, it would have been a sin, so Jesus couldn't have done it. No, the fact that Jesus did it, drank something that would lead people to think he was a drunk, even though he wasn't, but accuse him of it because they had seen him with a cup in his hand, that they were able to jump to that conclusion means that it was not a sin for Jesus to do so, because Jesus didn't sin. And so you've got to wrestle with that if you're on that side of the discussion. We just to bring this full circle before we move on, the three of us don't drink. The three of us advise you against drinking. The three of us say don't go out to the restaurant and order one because you might be a stumbling block to somebody. But no, it's not a sin. And when somebody has it now, drunkenness, yeah, it's a sin.
And again,
those are our premises. I think we're going to stick with. Go ahead, Will.
Agreed. And again, I can in the same breath say XYZ is not a sin, and also it's very, very unwise. We brought this up before about young people going to prom. Stepping one foot in the door at prom is technically not a sin. However, it's very, very unwise for young people to go to prom. That's what I'm going to teach my kids as well. With this, alcohol. Every class I've ever taught, I prefaced it with that. It is highly unwise. If you came to me and you were like, "Hey, I'm thinking about maybe getting into wine tasting or alcohol," I would strongly advise you not to. But in the same breath, I can also say, I'm not. Again, I'm
in
not
my opinion, I think it tracks
speak.
well with sex. It's enjoyable, right? I'm assuming I don't do that, but I don't drink. But there's an enjoyable aspect to it, but in its proper context. And there's a small context. You can go out and do a lot of sexual things that are perverted, that are against God, that are not good, and you're abusing something God gave you, using it for wrong reasons and in improper context. But there may be a proper context where that's appropriate. And yes, again, if you're one of those that's just wanting to turn us off, I just think it's hilarious. It's like you're leaving the room, or you're leaving room for discussion on this. You're in sin, so I'm going to slander against you to let people know that you're in sin. It's like, whoa, hold on. If we're talking sin here, have you ever heard of the slander? So, just comment, talk to us. If you have some strong opinions, everybody's got strong opinions about it. That's okay. But that's where we're standing on it. We're going to get into the next part, which is vaping or tobacco. I say vaping and tobacco go hand in hand in a lot of cases. Juul is a tobacco-based thing. A lot of people don't know that. They think it's just chemicals, but vaping doesn't always mean tobacco. And so you have people to make this distinction. Well, tobacco is wrong. It's addictive. But I just vape, and that's just these chemicals that, it's just an oral fixation. It feels good. Fellas, what would you say to that? Don't all speak at once.
I was going to plug the Godly Young Men podcast. Yeah, I was going to plug the Godly Young Men podcast because the episode that just dropped actually this week was about youthful vices, or this past week, I should say. Youthful vices, and one of the things we included in there was vaping, because vaping is something that a lot of young people do. I think Joe pointed out in the episode, you don't really see a lot of 18-year-olds smoking cigarettes these days. It's all on their, Juuls or their nicotine flash drives, or what they look like as flash drives or whatever. This is one of those things that is just, you see those stories, you see the news articles about the diseases that they're creating on people's lungs, and I think this is one of those things. Again, you say it's incredibly unwise, and one of the reasons it's vaping specifically. I'll leave the tobacco, I guess, to Jack. Vaping specifically is unwise. Think about how new of an invention that is. Think about how little long-term data we have on just how bad that can be for you. So yeah, I think it's obviously incredibly unwise. Can I necessarily call it a sin? I don't know. Jack, what do you think?
It's a hard one. I mean, we're finding out very quickly how negative that can be. We've got it well documented that what tobacco can do. And it's been so in the culture for so long. And so there's obviously this is detrimental to you. Why would you do it? And, it costs a lot of money. There's a lot of other considerations that go into it. On the other hand, it's weird that sometimes we get very hyper focused on this kind of thing being bad for you, when there's a lot of preachers I know that post about going through the Chick-fil-A drive-thru 5 days a week. That's objectively worse for you than the kid walking around with a vape in his hand. It absolutely is. I mean, like, because that might cause lung problems. This could, I mean, like, there's, from head to toe, there's ways that is going to destroy your body eating junk all the time, the way we do in our culture. And so the question is, do we need to, like, really condemn and come out against both of those things because you're not being a good steward of your body? Do we need to preach moderation? And moderation would say, well, maybe then some tobacco or whatever you can, do a little bit of damage to yourself. Or do we just say, you know what, this stuff doesn't matter that much? I don't really know what to do with it. I think that would be a moderation thing. And again, I'm not somebody who's going to touch a vape or tobacco or whatever, but there is a degree, when somebody's up to 3 packs a day and, like, just rolling through it, they smell like smoke all the time, and just things like that. Number one, bad money stewardship, and there's a lot that goes into that. But is there room for moderation? Maybe. This is a hard one.
Let me ask this. Yeah, it is a very difficult one. Do you see any distinction between, and I know people go to Chick-fil-A, I'll just use your example. People go to Chick-fil-A because they really enjoy it, right? I'm sure a dopamine hit or whatever. Do you see a distinction between fast food, Chick-fil-A, whatever? At least there is another purpose to it, which is you're eating lunch, right? You're nourishing yourself. Nourish obviously kind of debatable there, but you're feeding yourself versus cigarettes and vaping, which is strictly for enjoyment. Really, like there's really no other purpose to it other than I'm getting the dopamine hit, I'm getting the nicotine or whatever it is. Whereas yes, Chick-fil-A fast food is really really bad for you, but at least it serves another purpose, and that is you're eating.
So a bad version of something you have to do versus a bad version of something you're just doing just
correct
because.
Like, do you see a distinction there? To me, that's the first thing that popped into my mind when you brought that up.
There is a bit of one. I think broadly though, you're with both you're putting your body through stress and strain and tearing down your own physical health, and so in ways you don't have to, I guess. But I do see the distinction you're making there. Joe, what do you think?
Well, I think you can get on a slippery slope if you start talking about, well, it's just for enjoyment. Yeah, so is getting on Twitter sometimes. We get a dopamine hit from social media. Should we cut out all the things that give us dopamine hit? Some people get a dopamine hit just by opening a good fiction book. Like, dopamine's not wrong. The question is, are we able to do a little bit of damage to our bodies for the dopamine hit? I would say every time we eat a brownie, that's doing damage to our bodies, but ultimately for the dopamine hit, it tastes good and it gives us that rush. So do we cut out all of that? I think Jack's right in the fact that there's room for moderation. I don't do these things. I think it's highly unwise, once again, to engage in something that could be addictive, and like, for multiple reasons. Again, as he said, for the money perspective, for the health perspective, I don't think people can be addicted to Chick-fil-A the way they can be addicted to tobacco,
right?
Because of the addictive nature of it. So I think there's a part to be played there. You could say, well, it's a we're supposed to be sober. I don't think you can make a strong case surrounding sobriety because a guy smokes a cigar, right? I don't know.
I disagree a bit on the junk food addiction thing.
I think
it is really hard to stop when you're in the habit of going through drive-thrus, when you're in the habit of eating processed, junk stuff out of the bag, whatever. Like, getting away from that is really, it's harder to do than you think. And it's not just the dopamine, it is that taste. It is because the alternative you're replacing it with is not nearly as good and enjoyable and all that. And so I think there is an addiction that people have, and you can say, oh, it's not a chemical addiction like some of these other things, but I really think there is.
I'm not saying it's not an addiction. I'm saying to the point of smoking 3 packs a day, where you're like, you're Jones and Fort nicotine patches. I don't need a Chick-fil-A patch to get away from Chick-fil-A. You know what I mean? I'm not. Right. I think you're right. I think those things can be addictive. I think
that could be a money-making thing. It's
a Chick-fil-A
fast food, your Chick-fil-A patch, right?
There you go. This will get you away from it. I think vaping is a difficult discussion because, is it addictive? Now, I've heard, we're going to get into this with cannabis as well, marijuana, but the idea of, is it actually addictive? And I think the oral fixation can be addictive. Well, is it wrong to have an addiction to an oral fixation of just the smoke kind of going around in your mouth? Like, I don't know that we could say that. Here's my problem with it, Will, as you already said. Where's the 10-year, 15, 20-year studies on the cotton candy tasting chemicals that you're putting in your body? We don't know. This is brand new. These things come out on the market, and how long has this been studied? And if the FDA approves it, I don't care. The FDA is as crooked as I'll get out. So I just don't know that there's enough data to
here's
say.
The tough... Go ahead.
Go for it.
Yeah. Here's the tough question about this, because I brought this up also in, well, again, shameless plug, Godly Young Men podcast. Everybody always goes to 1 Corinthians 6, right? Not, what is it, 19 and 20, about your body's a temple, right? And obviously that's a sexual context that is being used there, but people will go to that verse when we talk about tobacco, when we talk about even junk food, Cokes, right? Things like that. And so it's very difficult, because what is the line? And we always like to have that hard, fast line, and this is just one that I don't necessarily think we're going to have. But yeah, I don't know, because every time I would hear somebody, because they usually would bring that up with tattoos as well. The idea that, well, your body's a temple, you got to take care of the temple, but you hear it with smoking as well. And so I've always, my retort to that has always been kind of what Jack said. Okay, well, that McDonald's Big Mac is not exactly great for your temple either, or the large Route 44, cherry vanilla Coke is not great for it either. So yeah, this is a very tough one, because you can say, oh, well, okay, well, in moderation. Well, what's moderation, right? Moderation, let's talk about the most subjective term on the planet. It's different for each person.
I think that do not be mastered by anything would be, sorry.
That's what I was going to say.
Go for it.
Yeah. No, you're good. I was just going to say, I think each person can know, okay, I have been to Chick-fil-A 3 times this week, and I'm craving again. I need to take a break. I really need to make sure that I'm not being mastered by this. Same thing with the Cokes. Same thing with energy drinks. Same thing with sugar. Just about anything you can think of. I guess my one disagreement with Jack here is I've been around people who vape, and to them, I do think it is slightly more. I think it is harder for them to stop vaping and stop smoking than it is for them to stop eating fast food.
I'm not saying it's addictive, not more addictive. I'm just saying I think sometimes we discount how addicted we get to the pattern, the habit of eating a certain way. And so, yeah, no, but I mean, there is a mental, physical addictiveness that is on a different level.
It's easier for young people to be mastered by that, I guess is my point. And so for that reason, I think it is a stronger, hey, stay away.
I want to roll this into our next one, which is marijuana. But I want to start with the idea, like they always talk about, marijuana is a gateway drug, right? And I think you're going to have parents listening to this going, well, vaping's a gateway drug as well. And these two things, this is, again, it's going to kick off our next point. But I think the reason why it's very unwise specifically for kids, first off, health reasons, brain growth, development, especially for weed. But I think the type of kids that are going to vape and get your kids into vaping are the type of kids that are going to get your kids into drinking, that are going to get your kids into trouble, are going to get your kids into porn, going to get your kids into a lot of different things. If they're willing to push the envelope and they're willing to do those substances at a young age, I think that's why these things are gateway drugs. It's not because the one time you smoke a bong, you're all of a sudden really craving heroin. It doesn't work that way. It's if I'm hanging around people and if I'm running away from my problems and I'm really trying to, I want to forget about some of these things or whatever it may be, that very much is a gateway to harder substances. And I would say the people you're hanging out with when you're vaping probably aren't the pinnacles of society. You do not see the guy that's the head of Goldman Sachs going out vaping and maybe, I mean, it used to be cigarettes, right? But these days, I just think there's a connotation and the people you're hanging around. So I want to bring that in, but I want to let that, again, kind of kick us off on the marijuana idea, because I'll start this way, and then Jack, I'll pass it to you, I guess. There's the idea that it's better than alcohol. Right, it's better for you than alcohol. It is a natural thing that grows. Hemp actually is grown, right? They've been doing this for thousands of years, smoking things that God has grown, and you get into different discussions, peyote and whatnot. But what would you say to the "it's better than alcohol" rhetoric surrounding marijuana?
That was, the selling point. We're from Colorado. That was one of the first states. Man, it is. I'm in one weird sense, I'm glad more states have legalized it, so it's not like, oh, Colorado, the weed state, because man, we got that for so long.
I remember us three were playing beach football the year after in Florida, January, the year after you guys legalized it, and some guys came up to us and wanted to play with us, and oh, where are you guys from? You guys are, oh, we're from Colorado. And that's the first thing they said. Oh, you guys legalized marijuana. I want to go there. That type of thing. It's like that was y'all's reputation there for a while.
Yeah. I mean, it was so frustrating. And it was under argumentation like that. Well, it's better for you than alcohol. And nobody ever, all these crimes that people commit while drunk, people don't do that while they're high. When they're high, they just get snacky and lazy and in a good mood and all that. And So you can almost buy it from that sense, but then, man, you just see people whose lives ruin, people with ambition that start in on that stuff, and just it's all gone. It just, I mean, like the laziness, and that's not to say, because then there's always gonna be the person. Well, I know a CEO of something that smokes every day. Like, great, there's always outliers, but in general, seeing what it has done to a population like that, and Joe brought up the gateway drug thing. I'll tell you, I don't know if it serves as a functional gateway drug for everybody who starts in on smoking it, that they're going to progress to cocaine and heroin and whatever else. I'm not going to say that. It was a gateway drug legally for Colorado and other states, Oregon, Washington, because then they went on to legalize mushrooms, legalize anything you want to put in your body, and people start doing that, and it becomes an industry, and it becomes established. And I worked for a summer at Mile High Stadium there in Denver, where the Broncos play, and driving down Federal Boulevard there for about 10 minutes from the highway to the stadium, I passed in a 10-minute drive over 30 dispensaries. Every single neighborhood throughout Denver, you could not turn around, you couldn't throw a rock without hitting one of these. That degenerates a culture. And because it's more widely available, because of that kids can find their way into it that much easier, it's not a good thing. It's not a positive thing. It is a direct violation. You ask, is it a sin? It's a direct violation of be sober. You are putting your mind into an altered state, and it's not. You're not hallucinating. You're not doing all kinds of like crazy way out there things, but you are. The reason people do it is because it alters their mental state.
Yeah, you're exactly right on seeing it in Colorado, like opening the door toward more and more and more things. And I do think that from a tax purpose, I mean, they've made billions and billions of dollars, and there's a reason why they did it. And I think you've seen it sweeping the nation, where more places are legalizing as you go, more and more states. And I just don't think that with that comes better decision making. I don't think with that comes. That doesn't mean that everybody has to be forced.
It's unwise.
Exactly. It's just unwise. I don't see what it benefits people. And I do see where it is legal. And even before it was legal, I had a bunch of hockey friends that smoked it, and they had their places of getting it. But when it is, I mean, I think you do see like young kids are doing this a lot. There are studies to show it very much affects brain development, brain growth. Your brain is growing until 25, and there's studies now saying it's plastic for a lot longer than that. What damage are you doing? So maybe it's not to the lungs like cigarettes are, but it does damage the brain quite a bit.
And this is one of those things that I desperately want to communicate to my kids, and this goes back to the alcohol point as well, and that is there are so many ways that you can have fun and enjoy this life without using stuff like this, without smoking weed, without knocking them back on the weekends, without vaping. There are so many ways that you can enjoy life more. And you see the people who get into the party culture and get into the marijuana, the vaping. It's almost like they don't know how to have fun over a game of cards. They don't know how to go out and have fun playing golf or reading a book. Or, there are so many ways that you can just enjoy life over coffee with a friend, right? Talking, again, doing a good day's work. There's so many ways that you can enjoy life, card games, all that stuff that I tremendously enjoy. I wonder how much I would enjoy that if I had gotten into, again, all this stuff that vices, so to speak. I want my kids to know there are so many ways you can enjoy life without necessarily getting into all that stuff. And honestly, probably you're going to enjoy it more if you don't get into all of that kind of stuff. You're going to enjoy the getting together with friends and being together, going to the movie theaters. You're going to enjoy more the vacations to the beach and, again, the golf course and things like that are... I don't know. Does that make sense? Like, it's just, I see these people that they don't know how to have fun and enjoy themselves unless stuff like this is present.
Well, and you see the people that all they want to do is go home, smoke a bowl, put on, whatever it is, whatever show that they like. And that's like that's the peak existence, man. I mean, that's the pinnacle there of to go home on a Friday night and just get high and, sit in your undies eating waffle crisp. I mean, that's like it. And you look at that and you go, wow. I mean, is anybody proud of legitimately? Is anybody proud of themselves? If you were to zoom out and look at anybody's life that way, and that's what you associate with weed. There's all the jokes about munchies and everything else. That's true. Like you are not at your peak. But I wanted you to comment on the big thing in today's culture are the CBD gummies. You're not getting the THC that literally makes you high, but you are getting the benefits, quote unquote, of the CBD. And so again, there's the gummies and there's the little like tablets or whatever that are supposed to help. They're supposed to help with muscle soreness, everything else. Some people smoke or they vape like CBD oil, and sometimes they rub CBD oil on it. So there's all sorts of uses for it without the chemical component making you high, which is THC. What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's fine. I think it's, it's natural. It is medicinal. It does have benefits. I think just as with anything medicinal, anything you're putting in your body, you need to pay attention and be careful with it. But if it's not mind altering, I don't take issue with that. That's just my take on it. Would you guys have anything different to add? But that is something that has really risen up, and unfortunately, it has been almost like a Trojan horse to bring in some of the negative stuff, the legalization. And I think it was Oklahoma I've seen that happen, where my in-laws live. A lot of CBD stuff, a lot of natural wellness treatment kind of stuff, and while we're here, let's just open up. Let's start moving towards dispensaries. And so, if it's used that way, yeah, that's not a positive thing. But I don't. I mean, there's a lot of medicines we use that are sourced from really weird stuff. It's just because of that connection that this one is. So let's get on to the harder stuff, because we're running up against our time here. This is something that has really grown in recent years. I think there's a lot more people doing it, or at least a lot more talk about mushrooms, psychedelics. Joe Rogan, biggest podcast in the world, is real big on that DMT stuff, which apparently, from what I understand, is like the heaviest of the heavy, send you to another realm kind of thing.
Ayahuasca fall into this?
Yes. I think that is
okay.
Either the same or related very closely to the DMT. On Focus Plus, we have a scriptural focus video that Will and I just shot. On the question was, does demon possession still have today? And I get into this stuff because I think some of this stuff very much touches on the demonic. It very much is contacting. People talk about the beings, the spirits they talk to in these other realms. In the Bible, pharmakeia, sorcery is how a lot of the translations say it, but it's the word pharmakeia. And it is potions, plants, using substances to alter the mind and do things. And I think it's not a lot of dots to connect to get to, you're messing with stuff you should not be messing with. But again, it's on the rise.
Jude talks about the Book of Enoch. It quotes from the Book of Enoch. I realize it is extracurricular, so to speak, extra biblical. It's not in Scripture, nor should it be. It's not in the canon.
It's not inspired.
Not inspired. However, it's got some pretty interesting stuff, and clearly Jude's quoting from it, and it was accepted in the day as, again, not inspired, but certainly maybe a book of history or whatever. I would encourage people to go back. I think it's Enoch 6. These are very short chapters. If you have an opportunity to go listen to it on YouTube, I think that you can listen to it, or to read it. It has this stuff, which is the idea that, and it's kind of the background is Genesis 4, right? I think, or Genesis 6 rather, where
the fallen angels,
with the fallen angels, right, Nephilim and such. The background is a little bit of that, but it talks about the angels coming down and teaching the sons of men how to contact these demonic realms, how to contact these spirits, specifically through weeds and through, burning certain things. And this goes back, this wasn't written in 1800, this was written a long time ago. There's some really, really weird things, and that's why I think so much of this is you get into the psychedelics and you can get into, I don't know, the weirdness that's taken place in San Francisco, the tech boom. You could call us conspiracy theorists. I don't know. I just think it's interesting that, most of the tech, Jack and I have talked about this, most of the tech that has come out into the world really started in San Francisco, where they were all tripping on acid back in the 60s. There's something to this. You can call us crazy, but I really do think that the DMT, the shrooms, the psilocybin, all of those things are really, really negative. And we're getting into it in the therapy world. They call it microdosing, where it opens your mind up to certain realms and where you can kind of process through traumas that way. And so therapists are starting to use it. This is really scary. You're messing with people's minds in ways I don't think we were intended to mess with their minds. Will, anything you'd add to that?
I'm going to be totally honest. I'm so uninformed and I have not researched this enough, so I'm completely deferring to you guys on this. I do that last thing you just said, Joe, about the idea of it is messing with things that maybe we shouldn't be messing with is what resonates with me the most. Again, as somebody who has not studied it and somebody who has not near as informed as I should be on it, it's scary stuff.
People who take DMT hallucinate the same being and the same things around the world. Some of the people who take it, there are documented studies and documented things where they literally are viewing the same spiritual being, quote unquote, and we're talking all over the world taking DMT. How in the world is that possible? That should not be possible because we all should be hallucinating different things. For one, the wall turns different colors. For others, different things. The fact that, I'm not saying it happens every time, but the fact that these things do, there's something more to that I don't think people are willing to, that they don't really know about. Jack, what were you going to say?
Yeah, it's very strange. I remember hearing somebody talk about, well, just, studies show that after one time of psilocybin and some of these mushrooms, things like that, your openness and agreeability scores go through the roof. Kind of your personality changes from this. That should scare you too. That you're just so much more open to new experiences and to new ideas and all that. Like, that seems like something Satan could really get a hold of and work with. And not that we have to be closed-minded toward everything, but on the other hand, if something just makes you accept anything and everything, that's probably not a good thing. And so as we go ahead.
Google MK Ultra and the CIA. They knew that. That's what they were working on. That's not a conspiracy. They now know that was the case. They were doing studies with acid for mind control. Whether it actually worked, I don't know, but I know they were certainly working on it, and I think agreeability scores go with that. Again, call us conspiracy theorists. I don't care. There's something to this.
This is probably the farthest we've gotten into the deep weird on.
It's bizarre,
man.
Sorry, keep going.
As I said, on Focus Plus, there's a scriptural focus coming out on demons that gets into some of this stuff. If this triggers your interest at all. So focuspress.org/plus, check it out. As we finish, of course, painkillers are an exception. Joe brought up the proverb about the dying man taking wine, Timothy taking wine for his stomach, things like that. And yeah, I mean, some of these narcotics, post-surgery or whatever, your painkillers, yeah, I mean, you're going to take something that is going to alter your mind. I think we would all agree there's exceptions in that state to do that. The problem is it's caused the opioid crisis. It's caused this thing where, I mean, hundreds of thousands of people, I mean, and when you take the ripple effect from that, millions of lives have been changed by people who doctors and hospitals have not responsibly weaned people off of this stuff. And, there's a brother up in, it's West Virginia or Kentucky. I don't know if he listens, but he's contacted me about this. He's like, why isn't the church talking about this? There are communities, there are families, there are churches that have been devastated by people just going in for a routine surgery, having the painkillers they give you, getting hooked on them, and their life is ruined. And I mean, this is such a big deal. In fact, it's one of, I think they say it's now the number one killer of people under 45 is drug overdoses, because they get into things like this, they go looking for harder things. The fentanyl thing is such an issue, and the bad stuff getting imported into the country, the fake, the mixed, the tainted stuff. Yeah, I mean, it is a really bad thing that I think has just gone totally under the radar. It's been laughed off by the media. There's no spotlight being shined on it. Some of the things that we have spotlights on, where it's like, you remember when it was sharks one year? It was like 10 shark bites the entire year. And, we're just going to talk about sharks, and everybody's scared to go to the ocean. But we're not going to talk about this, where hundreds of thousands of people have had their lives ruined by the opioid crisis, by these addictions, by the pill pushers, the Sackler family, these awful people. And it's a real thing. And I know we have listeners who have been affected by it, know somebody, know a family member, know a friend. There's a friend, was a close friend, I guess, to our family and the Harrod family, went down that road. Nobody talks to him anymore. He's very, I don't know where he is. I don't know. He's left his family, left the ministry. I mean, one of the greatest Christians, evangelists I've known, and it's heartbreaking. And this stuff just doesn't get covered enough. I hate that we don't have a ton of time left here at the end, but do you guys have anything to add here on, I don't know. I'm not even sure what to say about this. I just wanted to make sure we acknowledged it as part of all this as something we need to give a lot more attention to, and I don't know.
These things are highly, highly, highly addictive, and I think a lot of these people I think it's connected to trauma. I think a lot of addiction takes place when you are running from trauma, but some of this is, I mean, chemical addiction is obviously a very real thing. Get yourself, if you're one of those who's struggling with it, get yourself some help, get yourself into rehab, do whatever it takes. The statistics, and keep yourself and keep your loved ones away from things like meth as much as you possibly can. If you read books like Tweak, Beautiful Boy, those are kind of the two sides. It's like a 7% chance of getting out of meth addiction. I mean, it's so difficult. Avoid it, but the church has to be talking about it. We have to be teaching our youth. You have to avoid these things. And on the painkillers, we've got to be working with people on getting off. I mean, the doctors yes, family doctors care, but ultimately, if you're getting kickbacks from pharmaceuticals, millions and millions and billions of dollars are into this. They don't care about you. You're just a number to them, and you represent a lot of money. So yeah, you could talk about big pharma or whatever else, but ultimately, this is devastating communities. We, as the church, really need to rally around people, help them start opening rehab centers, things like that, or supporting the rehab centers working on that. I was going to say, I know we're running short on time. This is where you get into bringing marijuana back around. Some people will say marijuana is a better painkiller. It helps with the pain. People going through cancer, whatever else, it helps with the pain. I'm curious your thoughts on that, guys, because you may have some listeners that go, okay, what if I just smoke weed? I realize it's not great, but maybe it's getting me out of my mind. But so do opioids. I mean, when you're considering Vicodin and Percocet and things like that, that alters your mind, your mood, everything else. What are your thoughts on that versus marijuana as a pain-killing approach? It's a tough question. I mean,
it's something I've considered. I know NFL players have talked about it, because they're always on painkillers. They're in constant pain. And, the ones that have failed drug tests and things like that have said, what would you rather me do? Be popping these pills every day for the rest of my life or be doing this? And there's a case in that. I don't know what to do with it. It is very hard with, as you said, both of them are damaging your sobriety, your clear-headedness, but I don't know. I think that is worthy of more consideration. I think sometimes we just shut it off from the start of, well, no, marijuana, that's bad. Well, yeah, we agree it's bad, but we also agree these other things are bad, potentially devastating, potential negative health effects, again, affecting your clear-headedness, all of those things. And so I don't know. I think it might come down to a matter of conscience as to how somebody would want to navigate that.
And let me say,
tough questions.
I
hate it when we throw out tough questions and we just tell everybody, like, well, we don't know. What do you think? But I think there needs to be room for things like that. And I think it's a good thing to say sometimes, I don't know.
Right. I think you're right. I think it's a matter of conscience and what you think what you need. What I'll say toward the opioid crisis, and then I'll wrap up, at least my part. What we know is it's a lot harder to go down that path when you are very, very connected to family. When you're isolated, you're lonely, you don't feel people care about you. What reason do you have to get out of opioids, right? That's the high. That's what makes you feel good. That's what makes you feel like you're okay with yourself. When you don't feel that, when you're not connected to other people, you're not connected to family, it's so much easier to go into it. So the best thing we can do is create really strong families, really strong senses of community where they have a reason to live. They have good jobs, they have kids, and I'm not saying it doesn't affect those that do. It's affected a lot of people. But statistically speaking, and you see this in things like Portugal where they legalized everything, what they did is they spent all their money getting them, pushing them into getting jobs and houses and families and everything else and rehabilitating these people, giving them a reason to live, to not just chase the high. And they have a much higher rate of getting out of it. It doesn't mean it's perfect. It doesn't mean these things don't happen. But that's where the church comes in. We have to create the community where these people feel loved, they feel heard, and they have a reason to get out of the addiction.
And the one thing I'll say on this before we wrap up is parents with kids, talk to your kids about this stuff and don't just leave it at okay, well, don't do that stuff and then move on, because, kids need to know about all this. And if you just blanket it with, okay, don't do it, okay, let's move on to something else, they're going to be curious. They're going to get their information other places. They're going to get their information from places you probably don't want them to get information from. And so have these conversations with them about what the risks are, why it's bad. Not just that it is bad, but why it's bad for them and why it's unwise to pursue any of this stuff, the alcohol, vaping, any of the stuff that we've talked about. It's important to have the conversations and to have them thoroughly, I guess, is the way that I would put that. So anything else that you guys want to add before we wrap up this? I'm expecting a lot of questions, a lot of feedback on this particular episode with the Deep End and with our Focus Plus subscribers, and also those who were just comment on Facebook. Let us know what you think. We covered a wide range of stuff here, a lot of questions, a lot of things that we probably left uncovered. So let us know. Let us know what you have to say, any thoughts, any questions, additional questions that you might have. But guys, anything else to add before we wrap up this week's episode? If not, as always, thank you so much for listening. Thanks for the support, the ratings, the reviews, everything you guys do. We very much appreciate it. And we'll be back next week with another episode of Think Deeper.